Peter Coleman stood in his kitchen making coffee the same way he had every morning for 7 years. 2 cups, one black for him and one with cream and sugar for Lisa. The routine felt natural, like breathing. He could hear the shower running upstairs where his wife was getting ready for work. Everything was perfect in their small house in Boulder, Colorado. Lisa worked as a research scientist at the local university. She studied human behavior, which Peter always found funny because she seemed to understand people better than anyone he knew. She could read his moods before he even knew what he was feeling. When he had a bad day at the terraforming plant where he worked as an engineer, she always knew exactly what to say to make him feel better. Their house was filled with small touches that showed how well she knew him. His favorite books were always within reach of his reading chair. The fridge was stocked with foods he liked but never remembered to buy. When he worked late on project designs, she would bring him dinner without being asked. It was like she could predict what he needed before he needed it. Peter often wondered how he got so lucky. Lisa was beautiful with long dark hair and bright green eyes that seemed to see everything. She was smart enough to discuss complex scientific theories, but patient enough to explain them when he got confused. She laughed at his terrible jokes and never complained when he spent weekends tinkering with old machines in their garage. Their friends always said they were the perfect couple. At dinner parties, other wives would joke about how they wished their husbands were as thoughtful as Peter. What they did not know was that most of his thoughtfulness came from Lisa's gentle suggestions. She would mention that their friend Susan really liked wine from a certain region, or that Jake was worried about his mother's health. Then Peter would remember to ask about these things, making him seem more caring than he really was. Lisa never took credit for making him look good. She would just smile when people praised Peter for being such a good friend. She seemed to enjoy staying in the background, watching and listening more than talking. Peter noticed that she asked a lot of questions about people's feelings and relationships. He thought it was because of her work studying human behavior. Sometimes Peter caught Lisa staring at him with an expression he could not read. It was not sad or happy, but something in between. When he asked what she was thinking, she would always smile and say she was just admiring how handsome he was. Then she would change the subject to something about his work or their weekend plans. Lisa had very few close friends of her own. She was friendly with everyone but never seemed to form deep connections with other women the way most wives did. She did not talk about her family much either. She said her parents died when she was young, and she had no siblings. Peter felt bad that she was so alone in the world, but Lisa always said she had everything she needed with him. Their marriage was easy in a way that surprised Peter. They never fought about money or chores or whose turn it was to take out the trash. Lisa seemed to enjoy taking care of their home and never asked Peter to help with cooking or cleaning. She said she found household tasks relaxing after spending all day thinking about complex research problems. At night, they would sit together on their couch and watch old movies or talk about their days. Lisa was a good listener who asked thoughtful questions about Peter's engineering projects. She seemed genuinely interested in his work terraforming dead planets to make them suitable for human life. She would ask about the technical details and remember everything he told her. Peter loved how Lisa's mind worked. She could look at a problem from angles he never considered. When he was stuck on a difficult project, she would ask simple questions that helped him see solutions he had missed. She claimed she was just curious, but Peter thought she was much smarter than she let on. Their physical relationship was just as perfect as everything else. Lisa always seemed to know what Peter wanted, sometimes before he knew it himself. She was affectionate without being clingy, passionate without being demanding. Peter had dated other women before Lisa, but none of them had understood him so completely. The morning everything changed started like any other. Peter made coffee while Lisa showered. She came downstairs wearing the blue dress he had complimented her on the week before. She kissed him goodbye and said she would be home late because of a faculty meeting. Peter said he would pick up dinner from their favorite Chinese restaurant. Lisa paused at the door and looked back at him with that strange expression again. For a moment, Peter thought she was going to say something important. Instead, she smiled and told him she loved him. Peter said he loved her too and went back to reading the news on his tablet. That was the last time Peter saw his wife alive. The phone call came at 3 in the afternoon. A police officer said there had been an accident on Highway 36. A truck had run a red light and hit Lisa's car. She died instantly, the officer said, trying to sound gentle. Peter did not remember much about the rest of that day. People came and went from his house. His friend Jake stayed with him. Someone made arrangements for the funeral. The funeral was strange. Hundreds of people came, including many Peter did not recognize. They said they worked with Lisa at the university, but most of them seemed formal and distant. They expressed their condolences in careful, polite words and left quickly. A few of Lisa's colleagues gave speeches about her brilliant research, but they spoke about her work more than about her as a person. Peter felt lost without Lisa. The house was too quiet. No one brought him dinner when he worked late. No one laughed at his jokes or helped him solve problems. He started making only 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and even that simple change felt wrong. For 2 weeks after the funeral, Peter could barely function. He took time off work and spent most days sitting in Lisa's chair, trying to feel close to her. Friends brought food and offered to help, but Peter wanted to be alone with his grief. He kept expecting Lisa to walk through the door and tell him this was all a mistake. Peter finally forced himself to start going through Lisa's things 2 weeks after the funeral. He had been avoiding her home office, but he knew he could not put it off forever. The room still smelled like her perfume, and her coffee cup sat on the desk exactly where she had left it that last morning. Lisa's office was neat and organized like everything else about her. Her computer was password protected, and Peter did not know how to get into it. He decided to leave that for later and focus on the physical items first. Her desk drawers contained normal office supplies, research papers, and a few personal photos of their wedding and vacations. The bookshelf took up one entire wall of the office. Lisa loved to read, and she had collected hundreds of books on psychology, anthropology, and human behavior. Peter ran his fingers along the spines, remembering how she would curl up in her reading chair for hours with one of these books. Some of them looked very old and expensive. As Peter pulled books off the shelves to pack them, he noticed something odd. One section of books seemed lighter than it should be. When he pushed on the shelf, it moved slightly. Peter looked closer and realized there was a hidden space behind the books. He had lived in this house for 7 years and never knew about this secret compartment. Peter moved more books aside and found a small metal panel in the back wall of the bookshelf. There was no obvious way to open it, no handle or keypad. He pressed on different parts of the panel, but nothing happened. He tried pushing the edges and corners, but the panel stayed closed. Whatever Lisa had hidden back there, she had not made it easy to find. Frustrated, Peter sat back in Lisa's chair and stared at the mysterious panel. Why would his wife have a secret hiding place? What could she possibly need to keep hidden from him? They had never kept secrets from each other, or at least Peter thought they had not. The discovery made him feel like he did not know Lisa as well as he believed. Peter spent the next hour trying everything he could think of to open the panel. He looked for hidden switches around the bookshelf. He tried pressing multiple spots on the panel at the same time. He even tried saying Lisa's name out loud in case it was voice-activated. Nothing worked, and Peter was beginning to think he was imagining things. Finally, Peter decided to try moving the entire bookshelf away from the wall. Maybe there was access to the hidden space from behind. The shelf was heavy, and as he struggled to slide it aside, he scraped his hand on a sharp edge of the metal panel. Blood dripped from the cut onto the panel surface. The panel immediately began to glow with a soft blue light. Peter stepped back in shock as the panel slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside the hidden compartment was a metal briefcase unlike anything Peter had ever seen. It was made of some kind of dark material that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, and it felt warm to the touch. Peter carefully lifted the briefcase out of the compartment. It was heavier than it looked and felt almost alive in his hands. There was no visible lock or latch, just a smooth seam around the edges where the case would open. When Peter tried to pry it open with his fingers, nothing happened. The case remained sealed. He carried the briefcase to Lisa's desk and examined it under the bright desk lamp. The symbols etched into the surface were definitely not from any human language Peter recognized. They seemed to shift and change when he was not looking directly at them. The material felt like metal but was warm like living skin. Peter tried everything he could think of to open the case. He looked for hidden buttons or pressure points. He tried speaking to it like he had with the panel. He even tried bleeding on it again, since that had worked before. The case stayed locked, keeping its secrets hidden. Exhausted and confused, Peter set the briefcase aside and continued searching Lisa's office. Maybe there was a key or instruction somewhere. He went through every drawer and file cabinet. He checked inside book covers and under furniture. He found nothing that seemed related to the mysterious briefcase. As the sun began to set, Peter sat alone in the dark office holding the warm briefcase. His mind raced with questions. How long had Lisa kept this hidden? What was inside that she did not want him to see? Why did the hidden panel only open when it touched his blood? Nothing made sense. Peter thought about all the little things that had seemed perfect about Lisa. Her ability to predict his needs, her lack of close friends, her reluctance to talk about her past, her strange expressions when she thought he was not watching. Maybe these things were not signs of a perfect wife, but signs of something else entirely. The briefcase seemed to pulse gently in Peter's hands, almost like a heartbeat. He could swear it was trying to communicate with him somehow. The symbols on its surface appeared to glow faintly in the darkness. Peter held the case closer and studied the symbols more carefully. As Peter stared at the symbols, one of them began to glow brighter than the others. It looked almost like a fingerprint or maybe a handprint. Without really thinking about it, Peter pressed his palm against the glowing symbol. The case immediately clicked open. Inside the briefcase, Peter found objects that belonged in a science fiction movie, not in his wife's home office. There were crystalline devices that glowed with their own internal light. Strange instruments made of materials he could not identify. And most shocking of all, there were several journals written in Lisa's familiar handwriting. Peter picked up one of the journals with trembling hands. The first page was dated 3 years before he met Lisa. The heading at the top made Peter's blood run cold. It read Subject Observation Log, Species Classification Human, Operative Designation Zara 9. Peter's perfect world crumbled as he realized his beloved wife had been keeping the biggest secret of all. She was not human. Nothing about their life together had been real. He was not a husband, but a research subject. Lisa had been studying him like a laboratory animal for 7 years. The briefcase full of alien technology sat open on the desk, casting strange shadows on the walls. Peter stared at the journal his hands afraid to read more but unable to stop himself. Whatever the truth was about Lisa, about their marriage, about everything he thought he knew, it was waiting for him in these pages. Outside, the night was quiet and normal. Inside Lisa's office, Peter's understanding of reality was about to be completely destroyed. Peter sat frozen at Lisa's desk for what felt like hours, staring at the journal in his hands. The words Operative Designation Zara 9 seemed to burn into his vision. His wife of 7 years had not even been human. Everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie. With shaking fingers, Peter opened the journal to the first entry. Lisa's handwriting was exactly the same as always, but the words she had written made no sense. She described arriving on Earth and taking the identity of Lisa Coleman, a graduate student who had died in a car accident. She wrote about studying human behavior patterns and selecting a suitable subject for long-term observation. The early entries were cold and clinical. Lisa described Peter as Subject 7 Alpha and wrote detailed notes about his emotional responses to different situations. She had deliberately moved into the apartment next to his and arranged their first meeting. Every moment of their romance had been carefully planned and executed. Peter read entry after entry, describing how Lisa had manipulated him into falling in love with her. She had studied his previous relationships and designed her personality to be everything his ex-girlfriends were not. She learned his favorite foods, his hobbies, his fears, and his dreams. Then she became the perfect woman for him. The journal entries included detailed analysis of human emotional responses. Lisa wrote about how humans formed pair bonds and how these bonds affected their decision-making. She described Peter's behavior during their courtship with scientific detachment, noting how easily humans could be manipulated through their emotions. Peter felt sick as he read about their wedding day. Lisa had written that the ceremony was an excellent opportunity to observe mass human emotional response to ritualized pair bonding. She noted how Peter cried during their vows and analyzed what this revealed about human attachment patterns. To her, their wedding had been just another experiment. The early years of their marriage were documented like a research study. Lisa wrote about how living with a human subject provided insights that could never be gained through distant observation. She recorded Peter's daily routines, his work stress, his relationships with friends and family. Everything had been data to her. Lisa described the other members of her species as the Helian Collective. They were advanced beings who had been watching human civilization develop. The collective was debating whether humans were ready to know about alien life or if they were too primitive and dangerous. Lisa's mission was to gather data that would help them decide humanity's fate. Peter learned that there were dozens of other operatives like Lisa living among humans around the world. They were all gathering information about human behavior, technology, and social structures. Some operatives had integrated into governments and military organizations. Others, like Lisa, had chosen to study human relationships and emotional responses. The journal entries revealed that Lisa reported to her superiors regularly through the devices in the briefcase. She uploaded her observations and received new instructions. Her commanders were particularly interested in human emotional instability and how it affected their decision-making. They saw emotions as a weakness that made humans unpredictable and potentially dangerous. As Peter continued reading, he began to notice subtle changes in Lisa's writing style. The early entries were purely scientific, but after their first year of marriage, small personal comments began to appear. Lisa wrote about feeling unexpected satisfaction when Peter was happy. She noted inexplicable protective responses when he was upset or stressed. By their third year of marriage, Lisa's journal entries had become confused and conflicted. She wrote about experiencing emotions she did not understand. She described feeling illogical attachment to Peter and irrational distress when they were apart. She seemed to be struggling with feelings her training had not prepared her for. Peter found an entry dated exactly 4 years after they met where Lisa wrote about love for the first time. She described it as a human emotional state that appears to override logical thinking. She admitted she was experiencing this emotion toward Peter, but did not know how to report it to her superiors without compromising her mission. The later journal entries revealed Lisa's growing internal conflict. She was supposed to remain emotionally detached from her subject, but she had fallen in love with Peter despite her training. She wrote about the confusing human concepts of loyalty and betrayal, and wondered if she was betraying either Peter or the collective. Lisa had begun submitting incomplete reports to her commanders. She left out details about Peter's work on terraforming technology, which her superiors wanted to understand. She also stopped reporting on his emotional vulnerabilities, claiming they were insignificant compared to other observed subjects. Peter found several entries where Lisa had tried to convince herself that her feelings for Peter were just part of her deep cover identity. She wrote elaborate explanations for why caring about him served her mission objectives. But even as she tried to rationalize her emotions, it was clear she was struggling with genuine love and guilt. The most shocking entries came from the last year of Lisa's life. She had requested extraction from her mission multiple times, claiming her cover had been compromised. Her commanders had denied every request, insisting that her emotional evolution was scientifically valuable and should be studied further. Lisa wrote about feeling trapped between two worlds. She could not return to her own people without abandoning Peter, but she could not tell Peter the truth without destroying him. She described herself as no longer fully Helian, but unable to become truly human. She was caught between two species, with no clear path forward. The final entries in the journal revealed Lisa's growing desperation. She wrote about having nightmares where the collective discovered her emotional attachment and terminated both her and Peter. She also wrote about dreams, where she told Peter the truth, and he rejected her as a monster. Either way, she saw no future where she could keep the man she loved. Peter closed the journal and sat in the dark office, overwhelmed by what he had learned. His perfect marriage had started as an alien experiment, but somewhere along the way, his wife had become human, enough to love him. The question was whether that made their relationship real or just a more elaborate lie. The briefcase contained more journals and several strange devices Peter did not recognize. There were also crystalline storage units that seemed to contain recorded data. Peter realized he had only scratched the surface of Lisa's secrets. Whatever else she had been hiding, it was still waiting for him in that briefcase. As Peter sat surrounded by alien technology and his wife's confessions, one thought kept echoing in his mind. If Lisa had been reporting to her superiors all these years, what did the collective know about humanity? And more importantly, what were they planning to do with that information? Peter spent the entire night reading through Lisa's journals, searching for some proof that their love had been real. As he read deeper into her later entries, he began to see a different story emerge. The cold, calculating operative who had first arrived on Earth had slowly transformed into someone who genuinely cared about her human subject. The change had been gradual, but undeniable. In their second year of marriage, Lisa wrote about feeling unexpected pleasure when Peter surprised her with small gifts. She analyzed this response extensively, trying to understand why receiving tokens of affection from a research subject would trigger positive emotions in her. She concluded it must be part of her cover programming adapting too well to human customs. By their third year together, Lisa's entries had become longer and more personal. She wrote detailed descriptions of their conversations, but not from a clinical perspective. Instead, she seemed to be treasuring memories of moments when Peter made her laugh, or when they stayed up late talking about their dreams. She noted that she looked forward to these interactions in ways that served no research purpose. Peter found an entry from their 4th anniversary where Lisa admitted she had stopped thinking of Peter as Subject 7 Alpha. She wrote, "I find myself referring to him by his chosen name even in my private thoughts. This level of identity integration was not part of my training. I may need to request guidance from my superiors, but I am reluctant to do so for reasons I cannot fully explain." The most revealing entries came from Lisa's 5th year on Earth. She had begun questioning the collective's assumptions about human nature. Her reports described humans as more complex than her superiors believed. She wrote about Peter's capacity for selfless behavior, his loyalty to friends, and his ability to find joy in simple pleasures. These observations contradicted the collective's view of humans as primitive and emotionally unstable. Lisa had also begun to understand human concepts that the collective dismissed as weaknesses. She wrote extensively about love, describing it not as an irrational emotional state, but as a force that motivated humans to become better versions of themselves. She observed how Peter's love for her made him more patient, more thoughtful, and more willing to sacrifice for others. Peter found several entries where Lisa had tried to explain human emotions to her superiors, only to have her reports dismissed as contamination from prolonged exposure. Her commanders insisted that her emotional responses were temporary and would fade once she was extracted from her assignment. They ordered her to focus on documenting human weaknesses rather than analyzing their potential strengths. The frustration in Lisa's writing became more apparent as time went on. She felt increasingly isolated from both her own people and the humans around her. She could not fully connect with other humans because of her deception, but she could no longer relate to the collective's cold logic. She described herself as existing in the space between two species, belonging fully to neither. Peter discovered that Lisa had been lying to the collective about more than just her emotions. She had deliberately withheld information about human technological capabilities, particularly Peter's work on terraforming systems. Her superiors had specifically requested data about human engineering and space exploration technology, but Lisa had reported that Peter's work was primitive and irrelevant. The truth was that Lisa had recognized the potential in human innovation. She wrote privately about how humans approached problems differently than the collective. Where her people relied on pure logic and established protocols, Humans combined emotion, intuition, and creativity to find unexpected solutions. She believed this made humans more adaptable and potentially more advanced than the collective realized. Lisa had also been protecting Peter in ways that went far beyond her mission parameters. When the collective requested detailed psychological profiles that could be used to manipulate or control him, Lisa submitted false reports. She described Peter as emotionally unstable and unpredictable, hoping to make him seem like an unsuitable subject for further study. The journals revealed that Lisa had fallen in love not just with Peter, but with humanity itself. She wrote about human art, music, and literature with genuine appreciation. She described human holidays and traditions as beautiful expressions of their capacity for hope and connection. She even wrote about wanting to experience these things as a true human rather than as an outside observer. Peter found an entry from just 6 months before Lisa's death, where she had made a shocking decision. She wrote about requesting permanent asylum on Earth and asking to be allowed to reveal her true nature to Peter. She wanted to live as a human and help the collective understand that humanity deserved to be treated as equals rather than subjects. Her superiors had rejected this request immediately. They informed Lisa that her emotional contamination had made her unsuitable for continued fieldwork, but they were not ready to extract her yet. They wanted to study her transformation further, using her as a test case for how human emotions affected collective operatives. Lisa had become a research subject for her own people. The final months of Lisa's journals revealed her growing desperation and determination. She wrote about plans to defect completely, taking her research data and warning humanity about the collective's presence. She had identified other operatives working around the world and was documenting their activities. She intended to give this information to human authorities along with proof of the alien presence. Lisa had also been working on a comprehensive report about human potential that would challenge everything the collective believed about Earth's inhabitants. She documented human achievements in science, art, and social organization. She argued that human emotions were not weaknesses but advantages that allowed for rapid adaptation and innovation under pressure. Most importantly, Lisa had been gathering evidence that human emotional bonds created strength rather than vulnerability. She wrote about how love motivated humans to protect others, how friendship inspired cooperation, and how hope drove them to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. She believed this data could convince the collective that humans were worthy, partners rather than subjects to be controlled. Peter found Lisa's final journal entry written just 3 days before her death. She had discovered that the collective was planning something called Protocol 7 for Earth. She did not know the details, but her contacts suggested it involved either complete subjugation or elimination of human civilization. Lisa wrote that she could not let this happen to the species and the man she had learned to love. The entry ended with Lisa's promise to find a way to save both Peter and humanity, even if it cost her own life. She wrote, "I came to Earth as Zara 9, an operative of the collective. I will die as Lisa Coleman, a human who chose love over duty. If Peter ever reads this, I hope he can forgive me for the deception and understand that everything I became, for him, was real." Peter sat back in his chair as dawn broke outside the office window. Lisa had been an alien spy, but she had also been a woman who loved him enough to betray her own species. The question now was whether her sacrifice had been enough to save the world she had chosen to protect. Peter had read through all of Lisa's journals twice, but he knew there was more hidden in the alien briefcase. The crystalline storage devices glowed softly when he touched them, but he had no idea how to access their contents. After hours of experimentation, he finally discovered that one of the strange instruments in the case was some kind of translation and playback device. The device activated when Peter held one of the crystals near it, projecting Lisa's image into the air above the briefcase. She appeared as a 3-dimensional hologram, wearing clothes Peter did not recognize and speaking in a language that sounded like musical tones. The translation device converted her words into English, allowing Peter to understand what she was saying. The first recordings were clearly official reports to the collective. Lisa appeared formal and emotionless as she described her observations of human behavior. She used clinical language to discuss Peter's responses to various stimuli and recommended continued observation. These early recordings matched the tone of her written journals from the same period. As Peter worked through the chronological recordings, he watched Lisa gradually change before his eyes. Her posture became more relaxed, her expressions more animated. She began using Peter's name instead of referring to him as her subject. Most tellingly, she started smiling when she talked about him, something that clearly was not part of her original programming. The later recordings revealed Lisa's growing conflict with her superiors. Peter watched her argue with voices he could not hear, defending her research methods and questioning orders. She insisted that her emotional responses were providing valuable data about human psychology, but it was obvious she was really trying to protect both Peter and the information she had gathered. Peter found a recording dated just 1 month before Lisa's death that changed everything. In this message, Lisa appeared frightened and urgent. She explained that she had intercepted communications between collective command centers and learned about something called Protocol 7. The collective had decided that humanity was too unpredictable to be allowed to advance further into space. Lisa's hologram explained that the collective had been watching human development for centuries, waiting to see if humans would evolve beyond their emotional nature. Instead, human emotions had only grown stronger as their technology advanced. The collective viewed this as a dangerous combination that could threaten galactic stability if humans ever developed faster than light travel. Protocol 7 was the collective's solution to the human problem. Lisa had only been able to gather fragments of information, but the plan involved either complete control of human civilization or its total elimination. The collective saw humans as a virus that needed to be contained before it could spread beyond Earth. The recording revealed that Lisa was not the only operative who had developed emotional attachments to humans. Several other agents had reported similar experiences, and the collective was becoming concerned about widespread contamination. They had accelerated their timeline for Protocol 7, planning to implement it within the next year. Lisa's image flickered with emotion as she explained her decision to defect. She had been gathering evidence that human emotions were actually an evolutionary advantage, not a weakness. Her data showed that emotional bonds made humans more resilient, more creative, and more capable of sacrifice for the greater good. She believed this evidence could change the collective's mind about humanity. The most shocking part of the recording was Lisa's revelation that she had identified the location of the collective's primary monitoring station for North America. It was hidden in an abandoned military facility in the Rocky Mountains, disguised as a research station. Lisa had been planning to raid the facility and transmit her data directly to the collective council, bypassing her local commanders who had dismissed her reports. Lisa's hologram looked directly at Peter as she explained her final plan. If something happened to her before she could complete the mission, she was leaving all her evidence and the location of the monitoring station for Peter to find. She believed that a human might be able to reach the collective leadership in ways that a defective operative could not. The recording included detailed instructions for accessing the monitoring station and using collective technology to transmit data. Lisa had modified several devices in the briefcase to interface with human equipment, creating a bridge between the two technologies. She had also prepared a complete data package that documented human achievements and potential. Peter watched in amazement as Lisa's image demonstrated how to use the alien devices. She showed him how to activate communication arrays, how to encode data for transmission, and how to access collective computer systems. It was like she had been training him for a mission he never knew he would have to complete. The final part of the recording was a personal message for Peter. Lisa's professional composure broke down as she struggled to explain her feelings. She told him that everything she had become during their marriage was real, even if her origins were not. The love she felt for him had made her more human than Helion, and she would not let her people destroy the world that had taught her to love. Lisa's hologram reached out as if to touch Peter's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. She apologized for the deception and begged him to understand that she had never meant to hurt him. She said that loving him had been the most real experience of her life, and she would do anything to protect him and his people. The recording ended with coordinates for the monitoring station and a desperate plea. Lisa asked Peter to complete her mission if she could not. She wanted him to show the collective council that humans were capable of nobility, sacrifice, and love. She believed that her data, combined with Peter's own actions, could prove that humanity deserved to survive and thrive among the stars. Peter sat in stunned silence as the hologram faded away. Lisa had not only loved him, she had been willing to commit treason against her own species to protect his. Now she was asking him to finish what she had started, to somehow convince an advanced alien civilization that humanity was worth saving. The briefcase contained everything he would need for the mission: modified alien technology, detailed intelligence about the monitoring station, and Lisa's comprehensive data about human potential. There were also maps showing the exact location of the facility and security protocols Lisa had managed to steal. Peter looked out the window at the quiet suburban street where he had lived his normal life just days ago. Now he was being asked to undertake a mission that could determine the fate of his entire species. He was just an engineer who built machines to terraform dead planets. He had no training in espionage or alien contact. But as Peter held the warm alien devices in his hands, he realized he did not have a choice. Lisa had sacrificed everything to give humanity a chance. The least he could do was try to complete her mission, even if he failed. He owed it to her memory and to every human on Earth to make the attempt. The monitoring station was 300 miles away in the mountains. Peter had no idea how he would get inside or whether he could operate the alien communication systems. He did not even know if the collective council would listen to a human. But Lisa had believed in him, and she had believed in humanity. That would have to be enough. Peter spent 3 days studying Lisa's instructions and preparing for a mission he never imagined he would have to undertake. The alien devices in the briefcase were far more advanced than anything he had worked with as an engineer, but Lisa had been thorough in her explanations. She had anticipated that Peter would need to learn quickly, and had prepared detailed guides for using each piece of equipment. The hardest part was not the technology, but the decision to involve others. Peter knew he could not infiltrate an alien monitoring station alone, but asking friends to join such a dangerous mission felt like condemning them to death. Still, Lisa's recordings had made it clear that time was running out. Protocol 7 could be implemented at any moment, and billions of lives hung in the balance. Peter decided to start with his closest friend, Jake Morrison. They had known each other since college, and Jake was one of the few people Peter trusted completely. Jake was also a former Marine who had served in special operations before leaving the military to become a firefighter. If anyone could help Peter break into a secret alien facility, it would be Jake. Jake arrived at Peter's house that evening expecting a normal dinner and conversation. Instead, Peter led him into Lisa's office and showed him the briefcase full of alien technology. Jake's first reaction was to assume Peter was having some kind of mental breakdown from grief. It took several demonstrations of the alien devices before Jake accepted that everything Peter was telling him was real. The revelation that Lisa had been an alien operative shocked Jake almost as much as it had Peter. Jake had known Lisa for years and considered her one of his closest friends. Learning that she had been studying them all like laboratory animals was devastating, but Jake also understood why Peter felt compelled to complete her mission. Peter showed Jake the holographic recordings and explained about Protocol 7. The idea that an advanced alien civilization was planning to eliminate humanity was terrifying, but it also awakened Jake's protective instincts. He had spent years defending people from fires and natural disasters. The scale was different, but the principle was the same. Jake agreed to help with the mission, but he insisted they needed at least one more person. Breaking into a secret facility was a job for a team, not two amateurs with alien gadgets. Jake suggested they recruit Dr. Susan Wright, a linguistics professor from the university where Lisa had worked. Susan had helped Lisa with several research projects over the years, and was one of the few people who might be able to understand the cultural implications of first contact. Peter was reluctant to involve Susan because she was a civilian with no military or tactical experience. Jake pointed out that Peter and Lisa had been civilians too, but they were still planning to infiltrate an alien base. What mattered was intelligence and determination, not combat training. Besides, if they succeeded in contacting the Collective Council, they would need someone who understood how to communicate across cultural barriers. Susan's reaction to the truth about Lisa was complex. As a linguist, she was fascinated by the implications of an alien species that could perfectly mimic human behavior and language. As Lisa's friend, she felt betrayed and confused. But when Peter showed her the evidence of Protocol 7, her academic curiosity gave way to human solidarity. Susan had noticed things about Lisa that seemed unusual at the time, but made sense in retrospect. Lisa had asked strange questions about human emotional responses and social customs. She had been particularly interested in how humans formed groups and made collective decisions. Susan realized she had been unknowingly helping an alien study humanity for years. Despite feeling manipulated, Susan agreed to join the mission. She pointed out that her expertise in cross-cultural communication could be crucial if they actually made contact with the Collective Council. She also had access to university resources that might help them prepare for the infiltration. The three of them spent the next week planning their approach to the monitoring station. Lisa's intelligence indicated that the facility was disguised as an abandoned weather research station from the 1970s. It was located in a remote mountain valley accessible only by a single dirt road. The nearest town was 50 miles away, making it an ideal location for secret operations. Peter used his engineering background to study the facility's layout and security systems. Lisa had provided detailed schematics showing both the visible structures and the hidden underground complex where the real work was done. The facility appeared to have minimal human security, relying instead on its remote location and camouflaged nature for protection. Jake handled the tactical planning, drawing on his military experience to devise ways to approach and enter the facility without being detected. He acquired camping gear and off-road vehicles that would allow them to reach the site without using the main road. He also prepared backup plans in case their initial approach failed. Susan focused on understanding the collective's culture and decision-making processes based on Lisa's recordings. She studied the fragments of Helian language that Lisa had included in her files and tried to understand the social structures that governed their civilization. Her goal was to prepare arguments that would resonate with alien minds. As they prepared for the mission, Peter found himself thinking constantly about Lisa and the choice she had made. She had given up everything she knew to protect a world that was not even her own. Now Peter was being asked to make a similar sacrifice, risking his life and the lives of his friends to complete her work. The modified alien devices that Lisa had prepared worked better than Peter had dared to hope. She had created interfaces that allowed human computers to communicate with collective systems. She had also modified a translation device that could convert human speech into Helian and vice versa. Most importantly, she had prepared a data transmission system that could reach the Collective Council directly. Peter practiced using the alien equipment until he could operate it without thinking. The devices responded to his touch and seemed to anticipate his intentions in ways that reminded him of Lisa's uncanny ability to understand his needs. He wondered if she had programmed them to interface with his specific brain patterns, or if all collective technology was designed to be intuitive. Jake spent hours studying the facility's security measures and planning their infiltration route. The underground complex had multiple levels connected by a central elevator system. The communication array they needed was located on the deepest level, protected by both physical barriers and electronic countermeasures. Susan prepared a presentation that combined Lisa's data about human achievement with philosophical arguments about the value of emotional intelligence. She hoped to convince the collective that human feelings were not weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be respected. Her academic training in rhetoric and persuasion would be put to the ultimate test. On the night before they left for the mountains, Peter sat alone in Lisa's office holding the briefcase that had started everything. In less than a week, his understanding of reality had been completely overturned. His wife had been an alien, his marriage had been an experiment, and now he was preparing to attempt first contact with an advanced civilization that might want to destroy humanity. But Peter also understood that Lisa's love for him had been real, even if everything else had been a lie. She had chosen to become human through the power of that love, and she had died trying to protect the world that had taught her what love meant. Completing her mission was not just about saving humanity. It was about honoring the sacrifice of the woman who had loved him enough to betray her own species. Peter closed the briefcase and prepared for the most important journey of his life. Tomorrow, he would either help save humanity or die trying. Either way, he would be doing what Lisa had asked of him, carrying her message of hope to the stars. The abandoned weather station looked exactly as Lisa's intelligence had described it. Rusted equipment and crumbling concrete buildings sat in a mountain valley that seemed forgotten by time. Peter, Jake, and Susan approached the facility just after sunset, using night vision equipment that Jake had acquired through his firefighting contacts. Everything appeared deserted, but Lisa's data indicated that the real activity was happening far underground. Jake led them through a carefully planned approach that avoided the main buildings and the single access road. They moved through dense forest until they reached the coordinates Lisa had provided for a hidden entrance. What looked like a natural rock formation actually concealed an access hatch that opened when Peter touched it with one of Lisa's modified devices. The hatch led to a maintenance tunnel that descended deep into the mountain. Emergency lighting activated as they entered, revealing walls made of the same dark material as Lisa's briefcase. The tunnel was clearly alien construction, far more advanced than anything humans had built in the 1970s, when the surface facility was supposedly operational. As they moved deeper underground, Peter began to hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The alien technology around them was active and operating, though they had not yet encountered any occupants. Lisa's intelligence suggested that the facility was staffed by only a few dozen operatives, most of whom worked during normal business hours monitoring human activity across North America. The tunnel opened into a vast underground complex that took Peter's breath away. Multiple levels extended both up and down from where they stood, connected by bridges and platforms that seemed to float in midair. Holographic displays showed real-time information about human activities across the continent. It was like standing inside a massive alien computer dedicated to watching Earth. Susan pointed to screens showing familiar locations, including their own city of Boulder. The collective was monitoring everything from government communications to social media posts. They had access to information that would allow them to predict and control human behavior on a massive scale. No wonder they felt confident about implementing Protocol 7. Jake used hand signals to direct them toward the central communication array that Lisa had identified as their target. They moved carefully through corridors lined with alien technology, avoiding areas where the monitoring equipment seemed most active. The facility appeared to be operating with minimal staff during the night shift, giving them a window of opportunity. As they approached the communication center, they encountered their first collective operative. The being looked almost human, but moved with a precise mechanical grace that reminded Peter of Lisa in her more calculating moments. Jake managed to subdue the operative silently, using techniques from his military training, but they knew their presence would be discovered soon. The communication center was a circular room filled with crystalline arrays that pulsed with internal light. At the center stood a control console that looked like it could interface with Lisa's modified devices. Peter began connecting the alien equipment while Susan prepared her presentation and Jake watched for additional security. As Peter worked to establish a connection with the collective council, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Their presence had been detected, and they could hear the sound of approaching footsteps echoing through the corridors. Jake positioned himself at the room's entrance, preparing to hold off any attackers while Peter completed the transmission. The first wave of collective operatives appeared at the entrance, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of advanced tactical training. These beings looked more obviously alien than the first one they had encountered, with elongated limbs and large eyes adapted for their underground environment. Jake's military training allowed him to hold them off temporarily, but Peter knew they only had minutes before being overwhelmed. Peter's hands flew over the alien controls as he tried to remember Lisa's instructions for contacting the collective council. The crystalline arrays responded to his touch, establishing connections across vast distances of space. Suddenly, the room filled with holographic images of beings that were clearly the leaders of the Helian collective. The council members appeared as tall, graceful beings with features that were recognizably humanoid, but refined beyond human norms. They wore robes that seemed to be made of light itself, and their expressions showed the kind of serene intelligence that came from millennia of advanced civilization. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that the translation device struggled to convert into human language. Susan stepped forward and began her prepared presentation, speaking directly to the alien leaders, while Jake continued to hold the entrance against increasing numbers of collective operatives. She explained that she was a representative of humanity and had evidence that would change their understanding of human nature. The council members listened with apparent interest as Susan presented Lisa's data about human achievements and potential. She showed them evidence of human creativity, self-sacrifice, and capacity for growth. She argued that human emotions were not signs of weakness, but sources of strength that allowed for rapid adaptation and innovation. One of the council members, distinguished by robes that shifted color as he spoke, responded with what sounded like skeptical questions about human aggression and unpredictability. Susan countered by explaining that human emotions included not just anger and fear, but also love, compassion, and hope. She argued that these positive emotions had driven humanity's greatest achievements. Peter added his own testimony about Lisa's transformation from a cold operative into a woman capable of love and sacrifice. He explained how Lisa had chosen to protect humanity, even at the cost of betraying her own people. Her evolution from Helian to human demonstrated that emotions could improve rather than corrupt an advanced being. The council members began to debate among themselves in their musical language. The translation device provided fragments of their conversation, revealing deep philosophical divisions about the nature of consciousness and the role of emotions in advanced civilizations. Some council members argued that Lisa's transformation proved emotions were indeed dangerous, while others suggested it demonstrated their potential value. Meanwhile, the situation in the communication center was becoming desperate. Jake had managed to seal the entrance using some kind of emergency protocol, but the barriers would not hold much longer. Collective security forces were using advanced weapons to cut through the alien materials, and their breakthrough was imminent. Susan made one final passionate argument to the council. She pointed to Peter's presence in the facility as proof of human nobility. A primitive being had risked everything to complete his mate's mission, demonstrating the kind of loyalty and courage that emotional bonds could inspire. She asked the council to consider whether eliminating such capacity for growth and sacrifice would diminish the galaxy rather than improve it. The lead council member raised his hand for silence, and the entire chamber fell quiet. In the sudden stillness, even the sounds of the security forces cutting through the barriers seemed muted. The alien leader looked directly at Peter and spoke in careful, measured tones that the translation device rendered clearly. He acknowledged that Lisa's data and Peter's actions had presented evidence they had not previously considered. The collective had viewed human emotions as primitive impulses that needed to be controlled or eliminated. But Lisa's transformation and Peter's mission suggested that emotions might be an evolutionary advantage rather than a weakness. The council leader announced that they would postpone Protocol 7, pending a complete review of Lisa's data and further study of human emotional capabilities. He also ordered the immediate release of Peter, Jake, and Susan, granting them safe passage as representatives of a species that had proven more complex than the collective had understood. As the barriers fell and collective security forces entered the communication center, they did not attack. Instead, they stood aside respectfully as the three humans were escorted to the surface by the facility commander. The same operatives who had been trying to capture them moments before now treated them as honored guests under direct orders from the council. Peter emerged from the underground facility carrying Lisa's briefcase in the knowledge that her sacrifice had not been in vain. The collective council had agreed to reconsider their plans for humanity, based on evidence that emotions could be a source of strength rather than weakness. It was not a complete victory, but it was a chance for humanity to prove itself worthy of survival among the stars. 3 months after the infiltration of the monitoring station, Peter received an unexpected visitor at his home in Boulder. Vex Prime, the commander of the collective facility, arrived at his door looking remarkably human in casual clothes and a carefully practiced smile. The alien explained that the council had assigned him to serve as Earth's first official contact with the Helian collective. The transformation in how the collective viewed humanity had been remarkable. Lisa's data, combined with Peter's demonstration of human loyalty and determination, had sparked intense debate throughout their civilization. For the first time in millennia, the collective was questioning their fundamental assumptions about the relationship between emotion and intelligence. Vex Prime explained that the council had spent weeks analyzing every piece of evidence Lisa had gathered about human behavior. They studied her documentation of human creativity, resilience, and capacity for self-sacrifice. Most importantly, they examined her own transformation from a logical operative into an emotional being, capable of love and betrayal for a higher cause. The collective had concluded that emotions were not a primitive flaw to be eliminated, but an evolutionary advantage that their own species had lost somewhere in their development. Human feelings allowed for rapid adaptation, creative problem-solving, and the kind of irrational courage that could overcome seemingly impossible odds. These were valuable traits that could benefit any civilization. Protocol 7 had been permanently canceled, and the collective had issued a formal apology to humanity for their surveillance activities. More significantly, they had extended an invitation for Earth to join the Galactic Federation as a full member species. Humanity would be granted access to advanced technology and allowed to establish colonies throughout the galaxy. The decision had not been unanimous among the Council. Some members still viewed human emotions as dangerous and unpredictable, but the majority had been convinced by Lisa's evidence and Peter's actions that humans could be valuable allies rather than threats. To galactic stability, the collective was willing to take the risk of treating humanity as equals. Peter learned that Lisa's influence had extended far beyond Earth. The collective had begun incorporating what they called emotional logic into their decision-making processes. They were studying how feelings like compassion, hope, and love could improve their understanding of complex problems. Some collective members had even requested to experience emotions themselves. The revelation of alien contact had been handled carefully to avoid panic among the human population. World governments had been briefed first, followed by gradual disclosure to the scientific community and eventually the general public. The process had taken months, but humanity had adapted to the knowledge of alien life with remarkable resilience. Peter had been appointed as one of the primary human liaisons to the collective, working alongside scientists and diplomats from around the world. His unique perspective as someone who had lived with an undercover operative made him valuable in understanding how the two species could coexist. He also carried the moral authority of having risked everything to save his world. Jake had returned to his job as a firefighter, but served as a consultant on security matters related to alien contact. His military experience and level-headed approach to crisis situations made him useful in planning for various contingencies. He often joked that after infiltrating an alien base, fighting house fires seemed almost routine. Susan had become a leading expert on human collective communication, working to develop better translation protocols and cultural exchange programs. She was writing a book about the linguistic challenges of first contact, though she had to be careful about revealing classified information. Her work was laying the foundation for deeper understanding between the species. The most significant change was in how humans viewed themselves. Learning that an advanced alien civilization had initially considered them primitive and dangerous had been humbling. But discovering that their emotional nature was actually an advantage had boosted human confidence and unity in unprecedented ways. Human technological development had accelerated dramatically with access to collective knowledge. Peter's own field of terraforming had been revolutionized by alien techniques for planetary engineering. Humans were already planning colonies in nearby star systems, eager to spread their emotional approach to problem-solving throughout the galaxy. The collective had also learned from their contact with humanity. Their own society was undergoing changes as they experimented with allowing more emotional input into their logical processes. Some collective members had requested extended stays on Earth to study human behavior firsthand, though these visits were carefully monitored to avoid the kind of emotional transformation that Lisa had experienced. Peter kept Lisa's briefcase in a place of honor in his home office, though its contents were no longer secret. The device had become a symbol of the sacrifice that had saved humanity and the love that had bridged the gap between two species. Researchers studied its technology, but Peter was the only one who truly understood its emotional significance. On the quiet evenings, Peter would sometimes activate the holographic recordings of Lisa's final messages. Watching her image speak about love and sacrifice never failed to move him, but the pain of loss had been tempered by pride in what she had accomplished. She had chosen humanity over her own people, and that choice had ultimately saved both species. Vex Prime had become a regular visitor to Peter's home, fascinated by human domestic life and the emotional bonds that held families and communities together. The alien was undergoing his own transformation, developing what he called appreciation responses to human art, music, and literature. He was proof that Lisa's evolution had not been unique. The galaxy was changing because of Lisa's love and Peter's determination. The Galactic Federation was incorporating human emotional perspectives into their policies and procedures. Species that had been dismissed as too primitive because of their feelings were being re-evaluated and welcomed into the cosmic community. Peter had remarried, finding love again with a fellow terraforming engineer named Carol, who understood both his work and his unique history. Their wedding had been attended by both human friends and collective observers, marking another milestone in interspecies relations. Carol accepted that she could never replace Lisa, but she appreciated the depth of love that his first marriage had taught him. As Peter stood in his backyard watching ships from distant worlds cross the night sky, he reflected on how much had changed since he found that hidden briefcase. Humanity had gone from an isolated, monitored species to active participants in galactic civilization. The transformation had cost Lisa her life, but it had given both humans and the collective something precious in return. The stars no longer seemed distant and unreachable. They were destinations where humans would carry their emotions, their creativity, and their capacity for love. Lisa's sacrifice had not only saved humanity, but had taught the galaxy that feelings were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. In the end, love had proven to be the most powerful force in the universe, capable of bridging the gap between species and transforming entire civilizations. Peter carried that knowledge with him as he looked toward a future where humans and aliens would explore the cosmos together, guided by both logic and emotion in equal measure.